We come to this sacred space, made more sacred by the presence and attention of each and every one of us. Last week, we live streamed 2 events, our worship service, and then on Monday, the installation of our twice rededicated Black Lives Matter banner. Thank you, Steve Forcucci, for figuring out the technology to live stream events happening outdoors. And thank you, live stream friends, for being here, whether you're streaming locally or like this past week from Boardman, Oregon, or from one of a number of cities in Connecticut. If you're live streaming this morning, especially if you haven't done so before, please send us a quick note letting us know who you are and where you're live streaming from to checkingin@winchesteruu.org. And those here in the sanctuary, let's turn towards the welcoming congregation banner and at that camera offer our greetings to those on the live stream. Now let's take a moment to turn and greet one another.
Morning. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Ivan Correa, and I'm your worship associate this morning. The Winchester Unitarian Society is a welcoming, caring community devoted to growth and spirit, transforming society and being responsible stewards of the environment. Guided by our Unitarian Universalist principles and diverse traditions of many faiths, we strive to share a teaching of hope and peace. We welcome all to our doors, the joyful, the heartbroken, atheist, Christians, Hindus, Muslims, Jews, straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, all who are searching, seeking, looking for more meaning, service, and most important, love. What you bring, who you are, enriches us all. May this time together be a blessing. And now John Kramer and Reverend Heather have special announcements.
After worship today at noon, we will hold a workshop, Risks and Resources for Justice, beginning in the parlor and then moving into the sanctuary. It is meant to intentionally for those who are in our justice work, such as the Green Sanctuary team, racial justice, and social action, but is open to any and all who wish to participate. The workshop invites us to consider our collective understanding of what we bring to our justice work and what we are prepared to do with these resources. It will be fun and interactive. Please join us. I turn things now over to John.
And I want to offer a special invitation to all of you for our Jazz in the Sanctuary concert this Friday night at 8 p.m. We've got a wonderful quintet, trumpet, saxophone, piano, bass, and drums, some wonderful music and a theme of new beginnings as we sort of begin or continue our reemergence out of years in COVID lockdown. So you are our best ambassadors. Those of you who have been to the show, please tell your friends, invite your colleagues, your work friends, and everybody you know to come to the concert. It's going to be a really wonderful night and a great night of spirit. Now I invite us to open our minds, our hearts and minds, to the spirit of worship with these opening words.
For this hour we gather, to surrender to the mystery, to release ourselves from needing to know, the yearning to have it all already figured out, and also the burden of believing we either have all the control or none. Here in our song and our silence, our stories and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage, forged in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith, that we believe still a new world is possible, that we are creating it already, here and now. Come, let us worship together.
We now invite Jeremiah Fowler to come forward to light the chalice. The words of dedication are drawn from a sermon by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. One dies when they refuse to speak up for that which is right. One dies when they refuse to speak up for justice. One dies when they refuse to speak up for that which is true. In celebration of the Lunar New Year, please rise in body or in spirit to join in singing hymn number 353 in the Gray Hymnal, Golden Breaks the Dawn.
I'd like to invite all who would like to join me for a story. Good morning. I see a lot of wonderful faces today. Some are sleepy. Calvin is going to sleep right now. Good morning. Good morning, Piper and Ken. Nice to see you again. Zara and Cora and Alice, and oh my goodness, so many people. Look at us all. Kenny, sorry. I apologize, Kenny. My bad. All right, so today I'm going to tell you not really a story. I'm actually going to talk to you, and I'm going to ask you to vote. Voting is something we do all the time, right?
I know what voting is.
Yeah. What's voting, Piper?
Sometimes we fill out Marvel gel or silver ball gel, whatever.
Yeah.
We vote on things like we decide.
Oh, like you guess, you
Yeah, and then we raise our hand, and whichever has the most votes gets.
So whoever has the most vote wins. Yes, so that's kind of how democracy works, right? Our country's a democracy, and whoever has the most votes wins. So Zara was saying there's other ways we vote, like with our principles. We voted on what Unitarian Universalism principles would be, and we're actually voting again on that to be, very soon we'll be voting again. So that's exciting and always changing. In our families we vote, like who wants to watch this movie, who wants to watch that movie, we have to vote, right? Friends vote. Do you want to play this game or do you want to play that game, right? Alice, you vote. That's right. When you go to play a game with your neighbors, you have to vote to decide which one. So we're going to do some voting right now. And Rebecca has offered to be my counter. So that's really awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. So the first thing we have to understand is that voting is something that we do to stay at peace with one another, right? We say, okay, it's fair that the most people want this one thing, then that's what we'll do, because we don't want to argue and be upset with each other all the time. So it offers us a way to be connected to each other and have peace with one another, right? So it's a really important thing. Well, here we're voting right now. So we are going to do 2 different votes, and here's the first one. I'm going to decide who votes. So let's see, Cora, can you stand up, please? So if you're taller than Cora, you get to vote. If you're not taller than Cora, you don't get to vote, okay? Sure, go right ahead. Go ahead and measure. So some people get to vote, right? And some people don't. Is that fair, do you think? No? Why not? I mean, if the vote is tall people get extra stuff, and you're taller than Cora, maybe you want the extra stuff, you know? Does that seem more fair if you're taller than Cora? No. Why isn't it fair?
Because not everybody gets to vote. We go back to the.
That's right.
Let's go back to the Martin Luther King thing.
Exactly. Thank you for that bridge, Jeremiah. It goes back to Martin Luther King. So I'm going to tell you, in Selma, Alabama, Martin Luther King went to help them with protest. I'm sorry, Cora, you can sit down now. Thank you so much. So Martin Luther King went to help them with protests in Selma, because in Selma, Alabama, they had a test that only black people had to take in order to be able to vote. And it was an incredibly difficult test. Even white people who might want to vote, they wouldn't have been able to pass it, but they didn't have to take it, only black people. And so you can imagine, just like taking all the people shorter than Cora out, the votes went to the people who got to vote, right? They voted for things that they wanted, and the people who didn't get to vote, they didn't get much, right? Hold on one second, Piper. I'm almost done with this. So that's what happened in Selma, and that's why no matter your height, no matter the color of your skin, no matter a lot of things, everyone gets a vote. Yes, Piper.
I remember long time ago, a person wanted, there was like a big open lot. They had to vote what to go there, but some of them wanted to have a sport, like a playground.
Mhm.
Couldn't vote because
Yeah. So some people wanted one thing and they got to vote, and some people wanted a different thing and they didn't. And that's why we make sure that everybody gets to vote. So I'm going to do one more vote, okay? And in this one, I promise you everyone gets to vote. Even the grown-ups get to vote. All right, so here's the vote. Raise your hand if you would like rotten bananas on toast for dessert. Every night for dinner. Raise your hand. Every night after dinner, you get rotten bananas on toast. All right, we got a couple votes here. You got them, Rebecca? Rebecca's counted them. Thank you. All right, next one, next option. Raise your hand if you would like cookies and ice cream every night for dessert after dinner. Raise your hand. Okay, Rebecca, make sure you get that count right. It's going to be close, I can tell. All right. So, Rebecca, what are the results?
It was pretty close, but we're gonna have to give it to the rotten bananas on toast.
Wait, rotten bananas on toast got more votes than cookies and ice cream?
Well, we can't count a lot of the ice cream votes because we know a lot of the people who voted for ice cream have cheated before, so we can't. They're cheaters, so we can't give them the votes.
So they can't count because you think they cheated? Wow, does that seem fair to you guys? No, it doesn't seem fair to me either, Rebecca. So it's not fair when some votes don't count, right? There's a word that we have for it when someone decides whose votes count and whose don't. It's called fascism. Does anybody know that word? I know, it's a funny word, fascism. It sounds angry, doesn't it? Fascism. An angry old-fashioned donut. I like that. That image is going to stick in my head, Kenny, for sure. So there's a lot I could tell you about fascism that will have to wait for another time. But what I will tell you I know about fascism is that it makes for lousy dessert. So we are now going to ask the grown-ups to sing us to religious education. The words are in your order of service.
We now enter into a centering time in our service, beginning with a meditation, Prayer Ballot by Luke Stevens Royer. After the meditation, we'll take part in a ritual, kindling of the light, a time to light a candle here or at home in recognition of a joy, sorrow, or concern that you hold within. During the kindling of the light, if you would like to have a candle brought to you here in the sanctuary, please just raise your hand. After we kindle the light, we'll be together in a time of shared silence, out of which we will sing hymn 123 in the gray hymnal, Spirit of Life. Let us begin with Prayer Ballot. I walk in as on pilgrimage. The altar cloths are red, white, and blue. The ushers are the women who've been running these things, who've been running everything since before I was born. I'm handed the ballot like a scroll because the questions seem that important, ancient and modern, of what my God and country ask of me. Who? Who for commissioner, mayor, president? Who for District 8, Ward 7, school board? Who will do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly? I make my mark with at least a shred of hope that something good will come from this. And regardless, I remember the world won't be destroyed entirely by this. The world won't be saved entirely by this. Marking my vote is like kneeling in prayer, because neither will accomplish anything right away. But the purpose of both is to remind me of my deepest hope for the world I'm trying to help create. So I rise from prayer and turn in my ballot and remember the who is me and us and we the people. And again, I set to the task that is mine, justice, mercy, humble service in my small corner of the world. Let us now kindle the light.
Desmond Meade received a felony conviction related to his years as an active addict. Since entering recovery, he graduated from both college and law school. Meade and other activists addressed the need to return the right to vote to returning citizens like him, those convicted of a felony who complete their time in prison and probation in the state of Florida. After a long struggle, their efforts were successful through passage of Amendment 4 to the state constitution in 2018. Here is a brief interview with Desmond Meade speaking to the meaning of his return to the voting booth.
It's really created a newfound respect for the right to vote, and a much greater respect for the act of voting. You know, it's one thing to have the right, but if you're not using it, you know, I think that there's so much that you're missing there. Yes, we have COVID-19 now, but I don't think this is nothing compared to what our people faced, right, when their lives were actually threatened by the state-sanctioned violence, you know, being hung and being murdered and burned and bitten by dogs and sprayed with fire hoses, that our people went through that. We had people die on the battlefield so we can vote, you know. And so when I walked in there, you know, I realized it wasn't just voting, you know, and if nothing else, it tells me that you got to put some respect on my vote. You don't just get my vote for free. You don't get my vote because I'm black, and you don't get my vote because you have a D next to your name or an R. You don't get my vote, period. You have to earn my vote because too many people have died for me to have the right to vote back. Too many people have fought here in the state of Florida to pass Amendment 4 for us to just give it away to anybody. You don't just get it like this is something that is sacred. And so when I talk about bringing the spirit of my ancestors into that voting booth with me, that was a sacred moment. When I was bubbling this thing, it wasn't something that was trivial. It wasn't something that was just run of the mill. That was a special moment. There were so many people that could not experience that, people that was yearning. We have a member who used to go every year that there was an election. She used to go to the supervisor of elections office just to watch people vote. That's how bad she wanted to vote. So many people I've ran across told me that one of their biggest fears was to die before getting to see what it feels like to be an American citizen again. There's something sacred about that transcends all of this rhetoric that's going on today and all of this infighting. There's something sacred about a person feeling like they're part of society, like they're a human being, like their voice matters. And it should matter.
I believe in the sun even when it's not shining. I believe in love even when I don't feel it. I believe in God even when God is silent. These words, inscribed on the basement wall of a Jewish concentration camp during World War II, are a simple and profound articulation of faith. Last week, we celebrated the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Remember him as a person of faith. He was a Christian minister leading a Baptist congregation. But King and all those who fought for Black civil rights in places where the powers of the state were organized against them demonstrated a prophetic yet secular faithfulness. They imagined a different way to live together in society, in peace and shared opportunity not yet realized. As we know, one of the primary public parts of King's public ministry was seeking voting rights for Blacks in Alabama. The forces against voting rights were powerful simply because voting works. Voting allows one person to use their voice to help shape the nature of the society they live in. As Desmond Meade stated so beautifully in the visual meditation, we cannot take our own vote or the vote of anyone else for granted. Voting is sacred. This summer, a society member sent me an email suggesting we have a service about voting. Considering King's work for equality at the ballot box, I first thought that last week's service should be about voting. But there was too much to consider in celebration of King and too much to consider about voting for just one service. Unitarian Universalists affirm principles, the fifth being the right of conscience and use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Voting in a free and fair election is a mechanism by which every person can draw upon their worth and dignity to determine how to change the world through use of their voice. Quoting Stacey Abrams, voting is medicine. In this way, Unitarian Universalists profess a theology of civic life. In this way, voting is a spiritual practice. But this is one of the moments when it might make more sense for somebody in the pews to preach the sermon. The member who suggested a service about voting is also an active member of the League of Women Voters, as are many members in the congregation. And there are many among us who help run elections and serve as precinct chairs for their political parties or are members of their town meetings. I'm grateful to John Healy for his organizing efforts, helping us send postcards around the country promoting voter registration and turnout. Conversely, I would like to say I have voted in every election, and when I've voted, I step into the voter booth fully informed on all the ballot measures and candidates. Any other one wants to make that confession? I have not, and I often am not as prepared as I should be as someone fulfilling a civic responsibility. I take my own vote for granted. So often it's laziness that gets in the way, and cynicism. With all the manipulation of our democracy, the gerrymandering, the granting of partisan control over elements of what should be neutral processes, laws making it harder to register to vote, the continued restriction of access to the ballot box, it is easy to become disheartened. It is easy to believe that even if we use our voice at the ballot box, it cannot make a difference. But the sun still exists even when it's not shining. I thank Desmond Meade for providing the inspiration for today's service. Some may recognize him as the 2021 UUA General Assembly Ware Lecturer, a lecture he co-led with Stacey Abrams. Meade's story is just one limited experience in the vast crisis that is the current state of our democracy. But Meade's odyssey of personal transformation and electoral activism reminds all of us of the truths that remain buried beneath corruption and manipulation by people of all political parties. The people do have the power, whether we know how to organize it and use it or not. Change is possible. I learned Mead's story through his book, Let My People Vote, My Battle to Restore the Rights of Returning Citizens. It would be impossible to replicate the potency of his memoir in my summation, but his story serves as an important parable as we consider the true power of the electorate. Like many people, Desmond Meade became addicted to drugs and alcohol as a young man, and like many addicts, he had a number of encounters with the law. This culminated in a 15-year prison sentence. Once released from prison, he struggled with sobriety, getting clean, and then relapsing more than once. Addicts often speak of the moment when they hit bottom. Meade found himself homeless and desperate. He attended a church service, and after worship approached the pastor. He made it clear he didn't want money or a job or new clothes. He just wanted the pastor to pray with him. To this, the minister pointed out someone in the fellowship hall and said, "Talk to him. Make an appointment to meet with me tomorrow." The minister's dismissive response plunged Meade deeper into despair. Even if he wanted to come back tomorrow, he didn't have the bus fare to return to the church, so he just left. Desmond Meade decided that his situation was hopeless and it wasn't worth living anymore. So he walked to the train tracks and waited for the next train with the intention of jumping in front of it. He waited, and he waited. And as he waited, he thought about his funeral. Meade guessed that only 4 people would come to his funeral, his sisters and 2 nieces, and of these 4, only his nieces would mourn his death as, in his words, they were still too young to give up on me. Perhaps it was wanting to change that future that motivated him to keep walking. He thought about living a life that would lead to a different kind of memorial. Meade wanted to do something so incredible that when he died, they would need a stadium to hold all those who wanted to pay their respects. Meade assumed he needed to either be an athlete or an actor for such a send-off. Knee injuries made becoming a professional athlete impossible, and by his own account, he was no Denzel Washington. Desmond Meade re-entered rehab, and this time sobriety stuck. He became a leader in the recovery community. One evening, he shared his testimony, and a man spoke to him, letting him know that something he said changed things for him. In that moment, Meade gave up on the fantasy of the stadium memorial. He wasn't going to be there to experience it anyway, and was just content with making a positive difference for one person. When Meade was in prison, he sought to appeal his conviction, but could not get a response from his public defender. He decided to make use of the law library and file his own motion, which to everyone's surprise was successful. Meade then became an informal lawyer for many of the other inmates, helping them navigate the system and prepare their own documents. Through his ongoing legal self-advocacy, Meade's sentence was eventually reduced from 15 years to time served, or 3 years. Clearly, Desmond Meade had aptitude for the legal field. So when he finally became sober and left the streets of Miami, Meade got a college degree, graduating summa cum laude, and then a law degree. But as he had a felony conviction on his record, he could not sit for the Florida bar exam. And after he married and his wife ran for state office, he could not vote for her, as those with felony convictions lost their right to vote for life. Desmond Meade's larger mission for how he would make a difference emerged. Before we consider Meade's advocacy and its impact, consider the racial dynamics of a state law denying those with convictions the right to vote. While the commitment of felonies is about the same across racial groups, Black people and people of color are more likely to receive convictions. So denying people with felony convictions the right to vote is yet another mechanism to limit Black access to the ballot box. And stripping someone of civil rights grounds our justice system in punishment, not rehabilitation. As has been said of other policies, the cruelty is the point. Conversely, Meade demonstrates how restoration of voting rights is tied to lower recidivism rates, thereby creating greater community safety and saving the state money. As the leader of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, Meade and others led a campaign petitioning the state of Florida to add a ballot measure amending the state constitution to return voting rights to those with felony convictions with the exception of those convicted for murder or sexual crimes. The coalition avoided using the term ex-offender, as it sounded too close to sex offender, and chose instead returning citizen. Early in the process, Mead learned that this was an issue that in the end transcended racial lines and traditional partisan divides. Neil Volz joined Mead in his campaign, a white Republican former senator's aide. His own civil liberty is curtailed through punishments tied to the Jack Abramoff scandal. Conversely, the Hillary Clinton campaign refused to lend their support, fearing that there would be significant Republican opposition, which would boost Republican voter turnout. Where the coalition did receive consistent support was by faith communities, specifically African Methodist Episcopal churches and Unitarian Universalist congregations. Restoring civil rights for the formerly incarcerated is a secular mechanism for personal redemption. Mead also learned that sophisticated political machines were not always necessary. In the early days, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition's office was Desmond Mead's car. They were a nonprofit, but the original organizers never registered with the state. For many years, Mead lived off his student loans while leading recovery programs, going to school, and running the coalition at the same time. As the campaign began to gain momentum, another returning citizen with an equally profound odyssey as Mead's designed an ambitious campaign plan. They were getting some attention and support. When it became clear that funders expected that they hire a professional campaign manager, they did so. In the end, the professional campaigner came up with a near identical plan to the one created by the FRRC leader in her spare time. Desmond Mead invited supporters to set aside familiar antagonisms and come together around the united goal of re-enfranchising citizens. Who do you love has been impacted by having their civil rights removed for life, he would ask. Through this nonpartisan, inclusive campaign, Amendment 4 was added to the 2018 Florida ballot, and it passed with 65% of the vote. The sense of nonpartisan unity was short-lived, however. Immediately, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition was bombarded with calls and emails asking where people could find citizens with felony convictions who could be registered to vote, as if they were wild animals on the Serengeti, and politicians wanted to know the location of the watering hole. They're in your homes, your families, your churches, your businesses, Mead would reply. Returning citizens are part of our community. And once Amendment 4 passed, the state legislature, dominated by one political party in both chambers, passed a law denying the return of voting rights to those who had outstanding court and restitution fees, thereby creating another hurdle to enfranchisement. At its best, though, the campaign broke through the forces that divide us. Mead shared a story as a metaphor. A black heavyweight boxer drove his truck through a neighborhood in the wake of a hurricane. He picked up a man and his wife who lost everything in the storm, with the exception of a small bag of clothes and the man's Confederate flag. The man kept apologizing for the flag, and the wife jabbed him in the ribs, saying he should have left it behind. "Don't worry about it," the boxer said. "The tragedy is bigger than both of us." So much has changed for Desmond Mead. From addiction and homelessness to community activist, Mead won the Orlando Sentinel's Floridian of the Year Award in 2018, was named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world in 2019, and earned the MacArthur Prize in 2021. Like millions of other returning citizens in Florida, he is now able to register to vote. But as he has not received all of his civil rights back, he still cannot sit for the Florida bar. The poem the choir sang earlier concludes with words of confidence about what is possible. I believe through any trial, there is always a way. May there someday be happiness. May there someday be peace. Former Representative Adam Kinzinger, a member of the January 6th committee, recently said in an interview that we should not understand democracy by how it appears on its worst day, but more by how it comes back from it. Desmond Meade's work demonstrates that democracy is still alive. Yet democracy always hinges on enough people willing to create and maintain a system that transcends party and identity. Fascism is always lousy dessert. Efforts to silence the civic voice of Black people and others preceded the civil rights movement in Selma and continue to this day. I don't imagine that restriction to the ballot box and partisan manipulation will end anytime soon, but the sacredness of the act of voting also endures. Let us continue as faithful stewards of this practice for everyone.
The purpose of church is to encourage all who gather here to grow more generous in spirit and in action. Every week we take up an offering. It's good to remind ourselves from time to time that the offering is symbolic as well as practical. Through our annual pledges, we build our budget and fund our yearly programs and ministries of worship and religious education, pay our staff and professional religious leaders, and finance the comfort and beauty of our buildings. But we pass the plate during our worship service to make a community expression of thanks for the blessings of abundance, to visibly bring in the harvest at this most cherished hour of our week. This morning we share our gifts with the Massachusetts League of Women Voters Citizen Education Fund. The fund promotes voter registration, education, engagement, and protection activities, and educates and engages citizens through public conversations on timely and important issues. Here are the different ways you can donate. Those attending by live stream will soon see information about how to give. Those in the sanctuary may give cash, checks, or donate electronically. Text 781-230-6690 or visit our website under the giving page. Please write or type the date of your offering in the memo line or comment field. If you are visiting for the first time, either in person or online, you are our guest. The most valuable thing you can offer at this moment is your contact information, so we can stay connected beyond this Sunday. Live stream attendees will see information about how to complete the virtual visitor card. In-person attendees can find a physical visitor card in the pew racks in front of you. Please complete it and put it in the collection plate. The offering will now be generously given and gratefully received. Those who wish to do so are invited to join in the unison affirmation. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst differences, and to embody transformative love. Please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn, number 131 in the gray hymnal, Love Will Guide Us.
Please be seated for the benediction. We close with a poem by Mark Bellatini. I hear the polls are going to be open on Tuesday, all day. Good. I certainly intend to go to them. I certainly invite you to go to them and vote too. But today I say the polls are not just open on Tuesday. I say they are open every day, every hour, even here, even now. Right now, I'm going to vote for robin's egg sky, the vanilla clouds, the purple shadow spreading under the ginkgo tree. I'm going to vote for tulips and red buds. I'm going to vote for love that does not have to run in someone else's circles in order to be love. I'm going to vote the homeless into homes. I'm going to vote the uneducated into classrooms that teach them in the way they learn best, not the way that would be most convenient. I'm going to vote the sick into healing. I'm going to vote the lost into belonging. I'm going to vote right now for the dream of a world where the word politics doesn't stop me in my tracks and where the word honor still has a few good meanings left. I'm going to vote right now for the power of free people to actually be free, no matter who they are, no matter who has abandoned them, no matter who hates them. I'm actually going to vote for love. I'm going to vote for truthfulness as the norm, not the exception. I'm going to vote for a world that doesn't vote for killing, control, and swagger. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for me right now, right here, silently, but for real.
ended, but our life of service continues.